Hello, Montana, and hello, world. This is Chris Hislop from the Montana World Affairs Council, bringing you another episode of Connect Montana, where we bring the world to Montana and Montana to the world. This week, we've got an amazing series on peace and peace building because we're celebrating the International Day of Peace, which was actually yesterday. The International Day of Peace is devoted to commemorating and strengthening the ideals of peace, both within and among peoples and nations. And we're extremely pleased to be in partnership with the United States Institute of Peace. And of course, we couldn't bring these shows to you without the generous support of our sponsors at Stockman Bank, the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, and Allegiance. Also joining us today are our local partners at the Jeanette Rankin Peace Center. So let me introduce you to our first guest. Dr. Kathleen Kuehnast is the Director of Gender Policy and Strategy at the U.S. Institute of Peace, where she's worked since 2008. She's also a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. As a sociocultural anthropologist, Kuehnast is focused on the different gendered impacts of violence and conflict on both men and women. In addition, her efforts have focused on the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, including the critical role women should play in all aspects of peacebuilding. In this capacity, Kuehnast co-edited the volume Women and War, Power and Protection in the 21st Century. She has been a part of the international vanguard, introducing the concept of engaging men in conflict countries in the championing of women's rights. Dr. Kuehnast is a recipient of the postdoctorate Mellon Foreign Fellowship at the Library of Congress, and also a former postdoctorate Kennan Institute Fellow at the Wilson Center. Kuehnast is the 2015 recipient of the Perdita Houston Human Rights Award and holds a doctorate in sociocultural anthropology from the University of Minnesota. Dr. Kuehnast, you are very welcome. Thank you for joining our show.
Much and good afternoon. I wish I could be with all of you in person. Montana memories help fuel me during these remote working days. As I recall, a wonderful birthday several years back in the Big Sky area with friends and family, hiking up mountains and through wildflower fields and eventually to a small glacier. So during these COVID times, such memories like this are oxygen for breathing. You have a fantastic state. So on behalf of the U.S. Institute of Peace, I do want to offer sincere thanks to the Montana World Affairs Council for hosting this discussion today. Thank you, Chris and Nikki. We really appreciate your partnership with USIP's public education team over the last couple of years when USIP staff actually visited Missoula and Bozeman to engage students and educators around Academic World Quest and the USIP-inspired Classroom Challenge. In addition, I want to also thank the Jeanette Rankin Peace Center in Missoula for your outreach and your community engagement efforts around this program and beyond. When I think of Montana, I'm also reminded yours was the first state in the country to elect a woman to Congress in 1916, your own Jeanette Rankin. What a great first to recognize in your history. This week, as Chris mentioned, we are also inspired by the International Day of Peace, recognized every year on September 21st. And this year was our 6th annual Peace Day Challenge, inviting everyone to do something practical, big or small, to build peace in our everyday lives. There's no shortage for that need. And so we hope that you'll be still a part of the Peace Day Challenge and find us at #PeaceDayChallenge. Well, over the next several minutes, I want to share with you the work of the U.S. Institute of Peace and specifically our newest effort, the Women Building Peace Award. USIP is this country's national, nonpartisan, independent institute founded by the U.S. Congress in 1984 and dedicated to the proposition that a world without violent conflict is possible, is practical, and actually is very essential for U.S. and global security. It's important to remember that USIP was created as a result of 2 decades of work, both inside and outside of Congress, to establish a national institution that actually focused on peace. Beginning in the 60s, this effort was led by a bipartisan group of veterans who had served in World War II and were deeply impacted by that experience. They wanted to see peace efforts in parallel with the nation's 4 military service academies, therefore urging the creation of an institution that would consider the study and practice of peace and peace building as seriously as the study of war. So here we are, 36 years later, and you will find the staff both in Washington and in locations in some of the most difficult places in the world, often in conflict zones, working at the community level and regional and national governments, and focused on this connecting the top-down and bottom-up initiatives looking at sustainable peace. In January, before the pandemic, my team and I were in Burma, working on gender and reconciliation issues with ethnic organizations. We do this type of engagement through research, training, education, and the application of best practices to prevent, mitigate, and resolve violent conflict. So you might be asking, what does a director of gender policy and strategy do every day? I like to say that I work daily to help make the invisible visible. That is to say, I'm involved in the work of ensuring that women are counted, not only when it comes to the impact of war on their lives, but so that they're also counted when it comes to the formal and informal processes of building peace. After decades of research, we know that for peace to be sustainable, the peace process must be inclusive. And in so many ways, USIP's new initiative, the Women Building Peace Award, is about making the invisible visible. Slide, please. 1 week ago, USIP awarded its very first woman the Women Building Peace Award to recipient Rita Lopedia, whose work in South Sudan is amplifying the voices and stories of women and girls from the grassroots to the displaced and the many refugees that the South Sudan crisis has resulted in. She has created a special space not only for women, but men as well, to participate in peace processes and have brought together a very collaborative and inclusive way women political leaders, academia, refugees, and civil societies can talk with one another and have dialogues and help make change happen. I hope you'll read more about her, visit her, and her information at usip.org. Peacebuilders like Rita have found their work bolstered by efforts like the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace, and security. Such international policies have helped address 2 major problems we have: the inordinate impact of violent conflict and war on the lives of women and girls, and the crucial role that women should and must play in future peace processes. It calls for an increasing the participation of women and incorporating gender perspectives in all peace and security efforts. Parties engaged in conflict must take special measures to protect women and girls from all forms of gender-based violence, and further, to make sure that this not only goes for what's happening in terms of the violence on the ground, but that our peacekeepers and that our international humanity workers are also in line with protecting these vulnerable populations. So it's particularly gratifying to focus on the courageous efforts of so many women who work tirelessly to bring light and hope to some of humanity's darkest spaces. We had 10 finalists this year. I hope you will read their bios and watch their videos. It will put all of our lives into perspective when we see the kind of dilemmas these women are solving in their everyday lives. They are playing key roles in ending and preventing conflict, and too often their important roles are overlooked and undervalued. USIP is working to change that notion because in today's complex and interconnected strategic landscape where global violence is on the rise and nearly half of all peace agreements fail within the first 5 years, we cannot afford to neglect and exclude the field of peace building's most effective practitioners, and that would be women. USIP has long been engaged in supporting women peace builders in countries like the Mediators Network in Colombia, advocates for gender equality in Pakistan, religious leaders across the Middle East who are advancing the rights of women and girls, and leaders of non-violent movements around the world. We do hope that this new Women Building Peace Award shines a light on the indelible contributions of women peace builders everywhere and will inspire future generations of both boys and girls. In closing, USIP is committed to this annual award that honors an international woman peace builder whose contribution to peace is an inspiration and a guiding light for future women peace builders. And with the COVID-19 pandemic especially threatening fragile societies and historically marginalized people everywhere seeking justice, we hope that this award becomes a beacon of hope and strength. And we hope that you'll stay in touch with us through gender@usip.org or on our website at usip.org. Thanks very much. I look forward to your questions or comments.
Dr. Kuehnast, thank you so much. I mean, it's quite an extraordinary comment you make there, making the invisible visible. I mean, it really speaks, I think, to a lot of your work and the work of peace practitioners around the world. Now, I'm going to use the chair's prerogative and kick off with some questions, and then more are coming in on the chat box. My question, Doctor, is could you describe a little bit about the impact of conflict on women and how that may differ? So first of all, what is happening in conflict and how is that impact felt by women? And secondly, maybe a few words about what do women offer to a peace process? Why is it important that they are there? What do they bring to peace and conflict resolution?
Thanks so much, Chris. Those are great questions. First, I would say so much of our understanding of war has been through really the lens, if you will, of John Wayne's Pith Helmet. That's how we conceptualized it. It's how we've told the story of war, whether it's in, popular Hollywood movies or actually in our historic documents. And women have continually been invisible in that story. And only in the last 2 decades have we begun to really do what I would call ethnographic work, where we are talking to women and experiencing what is going on. Even though they might not be carrying weapons, they are carrying usually the weight of their society, their community, and certainly their family, usually an extended family, and sometimes literally on their backs. One issue is that women in most traditional societies, and many of these conflicts are happening in fairly traditional societies, their role as caretaker is not only a double burden during war, but really a triple burden, because all issues in that society then come on their laps to help solve, which is why if they are experiencing war directly, and of course they are often victims of war, and some are perpetrators of violence, but in most cases, women have great insights as to where are the fractured parts of their society. How could possible ways to help look at the problem, create dialogue, and to begin listening to one another to help solve the problem together.
Dr. Kuehnast, and I'm just going to remind our participants, you can chat in questions to Dr. Kathleen Kuehnast from USIP, either to me directly or to everyone as you like. This one comes from one of our audience members, picking up on, I think, on your bio that I read, and it mentions the, let me read this correctly, championing men who champion the role of women in peace processes. Just a question if you could expand on that dynamic.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, we have what is called the Gender Inclusive Framework and Theory. It's on our website. It's being translated into 7 languages. So if you want to dig deeper, it is a 16-page, very brief overview of gender analysis in conflict. We really look at this area as something we call peaceful masculinities. One, it is about how do you start changing the mindset that in women having more equal rights in a society doesn't mean that there are less rights for men. It is how really to start rethinking the conceptions of masculinity. And when a country or society has just gone through war, it is a moment in which negotiating these understandings of how the world is put together, certainly the gendered world, there are opportunities for, one, girls to go to school. And we always like to say we think of girls in school and we think of Malala, the Nobel Peace Prize winner of 2015. But there would be probably no Malala unless there had been Malala's father, who took great risk to stand up for girls' right to education in his part of Pakistan. So that is a part of, reshifting the conception of how we understand masculinities in war.
That's a fascinating take on a very multifaceted issue, certainly. Dr. Kuehnast, this one is coming from me. I did some background reading on USIP and your own work, and I found it very interesting about your engagement with the US government, particularly on different policy. It mentioned the US Global Fragility Strategy and Women, Peace, and Security Act. I wonder if you might give our participants a little flavor of what our government is doing and how USIP is supporting that.
Absolutely. So I will first say that USIP does not make policy. What we try to do is open dialogue and convene knowledgeable groups to help shape and form the good foundation of a policy. In the case of the Women, Peace, and Security, otherwise the nickname is WPS, this is coming out of the UN Security Council Resolution 1325, celebrating its 20th year in October. But in 2017, the president enacted the Women, Peace, and Security Act, legislated it to mean that all of our work in terms of peace and security must be inclusive and bringing a lens of women to solving these kind of problems. That's a really kind of simple way of putting it. But now you have the latest Global Fragility Act, which was assigned just this year, or toward the end of last year, in which, in the same manner as the Women, Peace, and Security Act, it is a whole of government approach to really come together and bring our best minds and resources to helping to solve these intractable conflicts, and to really look at these intersections and what we call fragility that, of course, include pandemics, it includes climate change, and it includes the critical issue of so many people in very, very vulnerable states, and of course then more vulnerable to violent extremism and war. So it is really an upstream trying to prevent conflict at its earliest stage.
Dr. Kuehnast, here's one from the chat box. I'm going to try to paraphrase, but you mentioned some research and decades of research that is the basis of a lot of today's work. Could you maybe say a few words about what does the research show in terms of the actual impact of women's participation in peace building?
One of the things, first of all, the research that we're talking about here is very qualitative because, of course, over the last 20 years, there have not been many women involved in peace treaties per se. And of course, we're witnessing right now the Afghan peace treaty processes. And we are thrilled that USIP has been a part of helping to train women mediators in Afghanistan. But the key thing with the research regarding women and their involvement is that it does seem to show that the peace treaties that have had women in the informal or formal part have actually lasted longer. And this was done through the United Nations, UN Women, in which they have looked at these issues and began to trace, oh, wow, this peace treaty actually even dealt with women's issues. And what do we see as a result?
Here's another one from a participant, kind of jumping ahead and just talking about there is a conflict, and within this conflict comes a peace process. And assuming a peace process is quote unquote successful, what is the role of women following a successful peace negotiation? How are women engaged then in implementing an agreement?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, women are not a homogenous group. Most societies have great diversity, age diversity, and they play many different roles. So one area that we have been looking and working is to help women become much more involved in the governance process, whether it is through becoming integral into a parliamentary system, or whether it is helping women actually, get government jobs within the government. That is something, though we think we hardly can remember when women didn't work in our US government. But in many societies, there are very few women in the government as well. And so that's one tactic. Another is making sure in higher education that women are at that external, are engaged in being able to influence younger women who are in higher education. There are so many different paths, and they all need to be examined to, especially in a post-conflict area, so that women's livelihoods can continue in coming out of a very vulnerable period.
Dr. Kuehnast, we're coming to the end of our show here, and we never have enough time to ask all the questions that we'd like, but we would like to come back to you for any last comments.
Oh, thank you so much. There is so much to say about this field of women, peace, and security. And if you're interested, please, there are a lot of resources on usip.org. If you want to become involved in what is happening internationally to make visible the great work of these women, please join us next year and throughout the year, actually, in where we'll be amplifying these stories. I think they really give us great hope about what any human being can do in the worst of situations. And I think we need that kind of hope every day. So thus, making the invisible visible can be part of all of our work. Thank you so much for this opportunity again to talk with you today.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much, Dr. Kuehnast, for joining us today. And special thanks to the U.S. Institute of Peace, our good friend and partner in this series and in other work that we bring as the Montana World Affairs Council. Tomorrow, same time, with a different link, is going to be Mr. Dennis McNamara. Dennis is a former senior UN official. He was the deputy representative of the Secretary General to Timor-Leste. He's held a number of senior positions and now works at the Center for Humanitarian Dialogue in Geneva, focusing on conflict resolution in humanitarian situations. So I invite you all to please join us on that one. And then we have Dr. Kuehnast's colleague on Thursday at the same time talking about local peace building initiatives. So thanks again to USIP. We want to thank our donors and sponsors once again, the Dennis and Phyllis Washington Foundation, Stockman Bank, and Allegiance, and our partners here in Missoula at the Jeanette Rankin Peace Center, and you all for joining this show. If you have other thoughts, ideas, or things you would like to see on this show, drop me a line. It's info@montanaworldaffairs.org. You can see the website address over my shoulder. Stop by. Support us if you like. Tell your friends. We really appreciate it. So thanks again, everybody. Have a good day and hope to see you tomorrow.